I never thought I'd witness an SUV sink into a suburban lawn like it was being swallowed by quicksand, but there I was, sipping my morning coffee on the porch, watching Karen's over-polished tank of a vehicle vanish half a foot into my grass, like a marsh had opened up just to punish her. She slammed the door, her screams echoing down the block, mud flying everywhere, high heels slipping as she charged up my driveway, looking like a soap opera villain who just lost a fight with Mother Nature. And the best part? She had no idea I built that trap just for her. Every inch of it was perfectly legal, HOA approved, and sweet as syrup on Sunday pancakes. Life in our neighborhood used to be calm, the kind of place where people waved at each other while mowing the lawn, and the biggest drama was whose dog dug up whose tulips. Then Karen moved in, and peace died a fast, ugly death. But if she thought she could park on my property without consequences, she didn't know the kind of neighbor she was messing with, because this time, the HOA's favorite tyrant was about to learn the hard way. In this neighborhood, the grass fights back. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts. Within a week of her moving in, peace left like it owed her money. It started with little things. Loud phone calls in the driveway, blasting music at weird hours, but the real crime, the one that turned my beautiful lawn into a battleground, was the parking. At first, I thought maybe it was an accident, one tire slightly brushing my grass. I forgave it. Suburban life teaches you to pick your battles. But then it escalated. Half the SUV was on my lawn, week after week, like she thought my front yard came with valet service. I tried diplomacy. I put up a polite little sign. Please don't park on the grass. Thank you. It had a little smiling cartoon flower on it, because I'm a man of peace. Karen laughed. Not just a chuckle, a full-throated ha, like she had just heard the funniest joke in the world. The next day, I found my sign face down, crushed under her tire tracks. I'm pretty sure I heard my grass weeping quietly. Still, I wasn't ready for war. Not yet. I approached her like a reasonable human being. I caught her one morning as she was stepping out of her glittering SUV, balancing an absurdly large iced coffee and barking orders into her Bluetooth headset. I cleared my throat politely. She glanced over like I was something she stepped in. I said, "Hey, just wondering if you could avoid parking on the lawn. It's been getting a little damaged." She smiled sweetly, leaned in close, and said, "You're really gonna cry over a patch of grass, sweetie?" Then she patted my shoulder like I was a child who just lost a balloon and stomped off in her 4-inch wedge sandals. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a misunderstanding, this was war. But I'm not stupid. I went to the HOA first. You'd think the Homeowners Association would be the natural ally for someone defending the green glory of suburban life, right? Wrong. Turns out Karen was not just a neighbor, she was on the HOA board. Not just on it, she basically was it. President, enforcer, and self-declared queen of all things tacky. Trying to get help from the HOA was like asking a lion to guard your steak dinner. When I raised my complaint, the board meeting was, let's just say, educational. Karen sat at the front table, beaming like a pageant winner. The second I mentioned parking violations, she interrupted. "Oh, you mean minor grass damage during temporary parking emergencies?" The other board members, 2 retirees who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else, nodded along. One of them actually yawned. I realized, with grim clarity, that there would be no cavalry coming over the hill to save my lawn. From that moment, I understood the lay of the battlefield. Karen wasn't going to stop. The HOA wasn't going to help. I was alone, and if I wanted peace, I'd have to earn it the hard way. I started small. Defensive strategies. I moved my sprinkler heads closer to the curb, hoping a little morning mist would deter her. Karen responded by buying bigger tires. I planted low hedges along the edge of my yard. Karen responded by flattening one with her back bumper and claiming it was an invasive species hazard. I left bright orange safety cones by the curb. She moved them and parked anyway, tossing one casually onto my porch like a trophy. Each move I made, she countered with the unrelenting determination of a storm. It wasn't about convenience anymore. It was about dominance. My lawn wasn't just grass to her. It was a stage, and she was determined to star in her own tragic opera. The worst part? She had backup. Every time I so much as hinted at frustration, she pulled the HOA card. "You're harassing me," she'd say loudly enough for the neighborhood to hear. "I'm an HOA official and I have rights." It was like arguing with a raccoon in a dumpster. No matter how reasonable you tried to be, you were still the villain somehow. Weeks turned into months. My beautiful lawn, once the crown jewel of the block, was now scarred and rutted, tire marks carving deep wounds into the earth. The grass struggled to grow. Birds started avoiding it. Even the squirrels gave it side-eye as they scurried past. It felt personal, like nature itself was ashamed of me. And that's when it happened. That fateful rainy Wednesday. I was inside making breakfast when I heard it. The unmistakable, sputtering, coughing roar of Karen's SUV trying to gun it onto my grass. I rushed to the window, coffee forgotten in my hand, just in time to see the tires spin uselessly in the mud. The rear end of her precious vehicle sank deeper and deeper, like a ship slowly accepting its watery fate. I swear the earth itself was smiling that day. Karen climbed out, high heels sinking into the muck, and started yelling at the lawn like it had personally insulted her ancestors. Her door slammed. Her shoes made wet, squelching sounds as she stomped toward my porch, covered in mud up to her calves. Mascara smudged into little black battle stripes across her cheeks. She jabbed a muddy finger at me. "Your grass ruined my car," she screamed, like I had summoned Poseidon just to inconvenience her morning. I blinked slowly, letting the moment marinate. "It's raining," I said finally. "It's soft ground. You shouldn't park there." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping on dry land. I half expected steam to come out of her ears. She stormed back to her car, called a tow truck, and spent the next 45 minutes glaring at me through the windshield while the tow truck driver tried, and failed, to pull her free without sinking himself. The whole scene played out like a Shakespearean tragedy directed by someone with a love for slapstick. And as I stood there, watching the chaos unfold, a thought sparked in my mind. A dark, delicious, unstoppable thought. What if I didn't have to fight her directly? What if I could use her arrogance against her? Turn her own entitlement into the rope she would trip over? Build a trap so perfect, so beautifully petty, that even the gods of suburban revenge would nod in approval? That was the day the swamp trap was born. Karen had declared war on my lawn. I was about to declare war on her ego. And this time, the earth itself was on my side. Some people plan vacations to the beach, some people renovate kitchens. Me, I planned an environmental warfare project so sneaky even Mother Nature would have high-fived me. I wasn't just going to teach Karen a lesson about respect. I was going to install an entire ecosystem under her SUV's favorite crash site, and I was going to do it with a smile so sweet it could give a dentist nightmares. The research phase was my favorite. Every night, while Karen blasted daytime court shows at window-rattling volume, I sat in front of my laptop Googling terms like water retention landscaping, natural bog creation, and how to make your lawn legally dangerous without jail time. It was like studying for a secret agent exam where the final mission involved frogs and passive aggression. I learned about bioswales, stormwater management systems, permeable soil mixes, all gloriously legitimate in the eyes of the HOA if framed properly. I even discovered that some cities handed out grants for sustainable lawn conversion. Imagine that, being paid to prank my nemesis. I started small, because you never lead with the uppercut. You dance, you jab, you set the rhythm. First, I subtly adjusted the drainage near the sidewalk, not enough to be obvious, but enough that after a good rain, the soil along the curb softened into the consistency of banana bread. Next came the secret weapon, engineered turf. It looked just like normal grass, but concealed a spongy underlayer of soil designed to trap water. To anyone walking by, my yard looked pristine, green, lush, suburban perfection. But beneath the surface, It was a trap waiting to yawn open like the mouth of an alligator wearing a Rolex. Karen, oblivious as a goldfish at a magic show, continued her ritual of curb hopping every morning and afternoon. I watched from my window, coffee in hand, as her tires kissed the new spongy soil and left deeper impressions with every pass. It was working. The land was learning her weight, welcoming her arrogance like a Venus flytrap luring a fly with free coupons. But I knew patience was key. Spring rainstorms were forecasted in a few days. All I needed was one good soaking and Karen's SUV would sink faster than her credibility at an HOA meeting. In the meantime, Karen started her next offensive. Flyers appeared taped to mailboxes and slipped under doors. "Save our neighborhood Astaic," they screamed, complete with blurry clip art of perfectly manicured lawns and a red circle and slash over what suspiciously looked like my house. Karen's propaganda blamed unsightly ecological hazards for ruining property values. Translation, she was mad that my swamp in progress didn't match her magazine cover fantasy. She even tried rallying neighbors to petition for my lawn's removal, but it backfired spectacularly when two retired botanists on our block chimed in to say, actually, native wetland features improve biodiversity and water conservation. It was beautiful. Karen, silenced by science, turned to dirty looks and muttered insults whenever I watered my new grass patches. I responded with cheerful waves and the occasional loud announcement like, "Just refreshing our local microclimate, Karen." I could practically see the blood vessels in her forehead forming a new HOA district of their own. Finally, the rain came. It didn't drizzle, it poured. Biblical sheets of water turned the streets into streams and tested every gutter, downspout, and backyard drainage system. I stood under my porch awning, grinning like a kid at Christmas. The trap soaked up the rain greedily, the engineered soil swelling and loosening. My front lawn looked as flawless as ever, but just beneath that deceptive perfection was a quagmire begging for a 4,000-pound guest of honor. The next morning was glorious. The air was cool, the birds were singing, and somewhere in the distance a car engine roared. A familiar, arrogant roar. Karen's SUV rounded the corner, shiny from rain and moving with the kind of swagger usually reserved for parade floats. She didn't slow down, didn't hesitate. She drove straight up onto the curb, her right tire sinking into the swamp like a hot spoon into pudding. At first she didn't notice. She flung her door open with the flourish of a royal decree, only for her expensive heel to plunge ankle-deep into the soft ground. The shriek she let out could have registered on the Richter scale. I sipped my coffee, pretending to be surprised, while inside my soul did cartwheels of pure glee. Karen tried everything. She revved the engine, she rocked the SUV back and forth like a desperate sailor trying to free a grounded ship. She even summoned her teenage son, who arrived dragging a plastic mat and a stack of plywood, presumably to construct a makeshift bridge. It was like watching a DIY disaster show filmed live in my front yard. Eventually, after 2 hours, 3 phone calls, and 1 failed attempt at using a neighbor's garden hose for traction, don't ask, the tow truck arrived. Now, I had considered this possibility. I had accounted for it in my design. The tow truck driver stepped out, took 1 look at the yard, and visibly sighed. He tried to position his rig on the street, but Karen insisted he back up closer, for a better angle. The driver, probably underpaid and definitely underappreciated, obliged. The moment his rear wheels touched my swampy curbside, gravity claimed its next victim. The tow truck, towing cable slackened mid-reach, listed to one side and tilted drunkenly into the soft earth. For a second there was silence. Even the birds seemed to stop chirping. Then Karen let loose a howl so loud, I'm pretty sure nearby car alarms armed themselves out of sheer fear. I had built a perfect ecosystem of karma, and it was hungry. Neighbors peered through windows, phones appeared. Karen ranted at the tow truck driver, who responded with all the enthusiasm of a DMV employee on their 5th double shift. The truck company sent a second truck, this one massive and equipped for recovery operations. And after a painstaking process involving winches, pulleys, and what looked suspiciously like black magic, they freed both vehicles. My lawn was a battlefield now. Deep ruts crisscrossed what was once my pride and joy. But I wasn't angry. Oh no, I was practically euphoric. because I knew what Karen didn't. Every inch of that swamp had been city approved, HOA endorsed, and legally protected. I had engineered not just a victory, but a monument. As Karen peeled away, tires squealing, and the crowd slowly dispersed, I stood there alone for a moment, looking over my war-torn yard with the pride of a general surveying a conquered battlefield. I knew she would retaliate. Karen wasn't the type to retreat gracefully, but whatever her next move was, I was ready. Because I hadn't just built a swamp, I had built a story, a legend, a trap with roots deeper than she could ever dig up. And the best part? The game was only just beginning. You'd think, after getting her SUV and a tow truck stuck in my swamp, Karen would take the L and retreat like a wounded general. But Karen wasn't built for reflection or self-awareness, no. Karen's natural habitat was denial, and after 2 days of hiding behind her blackout curtains like a suburban Dracula, she emerged with fresh fury and a brand new battle plan. It started with letters, not normal mail, mind you. Karen was a fan of grand gestures. Bright pink envelopes stuffed into mailboxes up and down the block, addressed simply to concerned neighbor. Inside was a 3-page manifesto accusing me of weaponizing environmental loopholes to create hostile conditions unbecoming of our community aesthetic. If passive aggression were an Olympic sport, Karen would have brought home the gold. She wasn't done. Oh no. She also filed an official complaint to the HOA board, citing irreparable damage to neighborhood beauty standards and emotional distress caused by malicious landscaping practices. I swear to you, she wrote the words malicious landscaping like she was describing a felony. Somewhere in the distance, a landscaper probably sneezed and didn't know why. The best part? She included blurry photos of my swamp garden, annotated with angry red circles like she was submitting evidence to a true crime podcast. One of the circled hazards was literally a frog statue wearing sunglasses. Another was a solar light shaped like a tulip. According to Karen, these were deliberate trip hazards designed to ambush residents during evening walks. If that's true, the frogs owe me rent. The HOA board, bless their exhausted souls, scheduled an emergency meeting to address the ongoing tension. Translation: they were sick of getting 37 emails a day titled, "Urgent! Lawn crisis continues." I showed up early, armed with my binder of permits, city approvals, soil sample data, and enough photos to make a National Geographic spread. Karen arrived fashionably late, sunglasses on indoors, dragging a rolling suitcase that probably contained every bad idea she'd ever had, laminated and cross-referenced. She opened with a monologue. No other word for it. Standing at the front of the room like a dollar store dictator, she proclaimed that the neighborhood was under siege by a rogue homeowner determined to destroy property values and community morale. I sat there sipping from a water bottle, trying not to choke. Somewhere, a neighbor quietly recorded her on their phone. When it was my turn to speak, I stood up slowly, walked to the center of the room, and placed my binder on the table with a satisfying thud. Then, in my calmest voice, I explained the entire project. The permits, the environmental benefits, the HOA approvals, all above board. I even passed around laminated sheets with diagrams showing how the bioswale reduced flooding risks and improved soil health. You could feel the room shift. Even the board members, who usually nodded off during discussions about lawn fertilizer, were sitting straighter now. I finished by smiling and saying, "Oh, and here's the best part. My project qualifies our neighborhood for a municipal sustainability grant. Could mean funding for sidewalks, tree planting, maybe even a park upgrade." I let that hang in the air like a mic drop. Karen's jaw locked so tight I thought I heard a molar crack. She tried to interrupt, waving a packet of photographs like she was holding a royal decree, but the HOA president cut her off gently, like someone putting down a rabid raccoon. "Karen, we appreciate your concerns, but everything appears to be in compliance." He paused, flipping through my handouts, and frankly, it's kind of impressive. I didn't need applause. The stunned silence was reward enough. Karen sat down, hard, arms crossed, seething in her chair like a toddler denied a lollipop. Meeting adjourned. But Karen wasn't going to lose gracefully. No, she switched tactics from bureaucratic assault to psychological warfare. The next morning, a for sale sign appeared on her lawn, but not your typical understated real estate sign. Oh no. It was a massive custom banner reading "House for Sale" next to "Swamp Disaster." Subtly left the chart. Neighbors walked by in stunned fascination. Some took pictures. One guy jogged past, doubled back, and laughed so hard he had to lean on a mailbox for support. I stood on my porch, coffee in hand as always, and waved at Karen with my brightest grin. She turned away, muttering under her breath. But even that wasn't her grand finale. No, that came 2 days later when Karen tried to sabotage the swamp. Again, late at night, under the cover of darkness, and ironically my brand new motion sensor lights, Karen crept onto my lawn armed with a giant bag of cement mix. Yes, cement. Her master plan was apparently to fill the swamp patch with quick dry cement, neutralizing the trap once and for all. She moved like a raccoon on a Red Bull bender, crouching, scattering powder, glancing around dramatically. She might have gotten away with it too if not for the sprinklers. I'd programmed them to activate randomly after midnight, a paranoid precaution that turned out to be chef's kiss perfect. Right as Karen dumped the second bag of cement dust, the sprinklers roared to life like angry geysers. A jet of water hit her square in the chest, soaking her through in seconds. Cement powder mixed with water turned to sludge instantly, plastering her pants, shoes, and handbag into one sticky gray mess. She slipped, stumbled, and finally sat down hard in the mud like a grumpy statue unveiling itself to the world. Cameras caught the whole thing. Trail cams, doorbell cams, neighbor phones. The next day, Karen vs. Sprinkler Justice was the #1 post on the neighborhood Facebook page. Someone even set it to dramatic opera music. By the time the HOA disciplinary committee reviewed the footage, Karen's credibility was as ruined as her suede loafers. She was formally reprimanded for property vandalism and public disturbance. Fines were issued, HOA privileges revoked. For the first time since she invaded our peaceful block, Karen was, officially and gloriously, powerless. But I wasn't celebrating yet. Oh no, I knew her type. Karen wasn't done. She would never be done until the final curtain fell. And I planned to deliver that curtain call with style, because if she thought a muddy SUV and a few fines were humiliating, she hadn't yet seen what I had planned for the grand finale. And trust me, it was going to be legendary. You'd think, after cementing herself into suburban infamy, Karen would finally throw in the towel, maybe even take a long vacation to reflect on her choices, preferably somewhere without HOA jurisdictions, like the middle of the Pacific Ocean. But no, Karen didn't retreat. She regrouped. She reloaded, and of course, she retaliated in the most predictably ridiculous way imaginable by filing a formal lawsuit. Yes, you heard me, a lawsuit over grass. The papers arrived on a Friday afternoon, hand-delivered by a process server who looked so embarrassed he couldn't meet my eyes. I opened the envelope like I was unwrapping a prank gift on a reality show. Inside was Karen's masterwork, a 10-page complaint accusing me of emotional distress, property devaluation, intentional landscaping sabotage, and my personal favorite, biological warfare via uncontrolled amphibian proliferation. In simpler terms, Karen was suing me for frogs. I laughed so hard I almost pulled a muscle. Biological warfare? What did she think I was doing? Training the frogs to launch guerrilla attacks on her begonias? Maybe giving them tiny helmets and mission briefings? I half expected page 11 to accuse me of amphibian espionage. But as hilarious as it was, I knew better than to underestimate Karen's dedication to self-sabotage. I needed to shut this down fast, clean, and publicly, because if there's one thing Karen hated more than losing, it was losing with an audience. First, I called my buddy Travis, a lawyer whose main hobby was dismantling frivolous lawsuits like they were IKEA furniture. I forwarded him Karen's complaint, and by the time I finished reading the cover letter out loud, he was already laughing on speakerphone. "This is a work of art," he said between wheezes. A terrible flaming dumpster fire of art, but art nonetheless. He drafted a brutal motion to dismiss within 48 hours. It was a masterpiece, full of citations, city code references, and enough rhetorical judo to make a debate team blush. We filed it immediately. In the meantime, I decided it was time to really drive the nail into Karen's crumbling empire. I printed flyers, oh yes, big, colorful flyers featuring cheerful frogs in tiny graduation caps under the headline, Official Swamp University, now enrolling, learn how to stay off my lawn. I didn't distribute them directly, that would be petty. Instead, I accidentally left a neat stack at the local coffee shop, the post office, and the HOA Community Center bulletin board. Word traveled faster than a frog hopping from a frying pan. Karen's meltdown was spectacular. She stormed into the HOA office demanding they sanction me for public ridicule. The HOA president, who by this point kept a bottle of aspirin on his desk labeled, "For Karen emergencies only," politely explained that as long as I wasn't naming her directly, it was protected speech. She left shrieking something about defamation by amphibian association, and somewhere deep in my soul, I knew we had crossed the threshold from suburban drama into Shakespearean comedy. Meanwhile, my swamp flourished thanks to some heavy rainfall and careful tending. The bioswale transformed into a lush, vibrant microhabitat. Butterflies flitted among wildflowers, bees hummed around native grasses. Even a family of ducks stopped by for a swim one glorious afternoon. I named the mother duck Justice and her ducklings Vindication, Karma, and Oopsie. Neighbors loved it. Kids came by to watch the frogs. One family even set up a picnic blanket on the dry edge of the wetland and had lunch while their toddler pointed at dragonflies. The HOA, eager to distance themselves from Karen's chaos, formally praised the project in the monthly newsletter, calling it an exemplary model of sustainable landscaping. Karen, on the other hand, spiraled. She stopped waving at neighbors, stopped hosting her passive-aggressive beautification meetings. At one point, she put up a 6-foot privacy screen along the side of her yard facing mine, complete with a no trampasing sign, as if my swamp frogs were plotting a home invasion. It backfired beautifully. The screen violated city sightline codes, and she got fined. Again. But the best was yet to come. Karen arrived dressed like she was attending a royal inquest. Blazer, pearls, a stack of documents so thick it needed its own seat. I wore jeans, a button-down, and my calmest smile. Travis came armed with a briefcase full of legal napalm. When the judge, an older man with the tired air of someone who'd seen it all, called the case, Karen launched into her speech. She sobbed. She ranted. She described my yard as an amphibious minefield designed to entrap innocent homeowners. At one point, she even claimed my frogs were responsible for the increased humidity levels damaging her hair. The judge blinked slowly, like a lizard absorbing sunlight. Then he turned to Travis. "Your motion to dismiss?" Travis stood up, flipped open the binder with a single crisp motion, and delivered a 3-minute obliteration so precise it should have been scored by a symphony orchestra. When he finished, the judge looked at Karen and said, "Ma'am, unless you have evidence of intentional harm, beyond normal property use, and city-approved landscaping, I'm dismissing this case with prejudice." Karen sputtered. She gestured wildly. She demanded an appeal. The judge banged his gavel. "Case dismissed. Defendant may recover court costs." I turned to Karen and gave her the smallest, politest nod I could muster. The kind of nod you give when someone just slipped on a banana peel. She glared back, clutching her pearls like they were going to save her from the fallout. When I stepped outside, the sun was shining, birds were singing, and somewhere in the distance, a frog croaked, in perfect comedic timing. But the story wasn't quite over yet. Oh no. Karen had lost in court, lost with the HOA, lost the neighborhood's respect, and lost her fake moral crusade. But I had one final act of poetic justice planned. Because what's better than beating a Karen? Making sure she's remembered for exactly what she was. And let me tell you, the final chapter was about to be beautiful. You'd think, after getting flattened in court, losing face at every HOA meeting and starring in the neighborhood group chats like the villain in a bad soap opera. Karen would finally lay low, maybe hide behind her curtains, nurture her rage into a respectable indoor hobby like aggressive knitting. But nope, Karen had one final move up her bedazzled sleeve. She decided to list her house for sale. A quiet exit? Not Karen's style. The for sale sign went up on a sunny Tuesday morning. Big, bold, and planted proudly in her front yard, like she was hosting a farewell parade in her own honor. I had to hand it to her. Most people leave quietly when they realize they're the problem. Karen decided to throw herself a pity gala. Flyers appeared taped to mailboxes. Open house! Come see a true pillar of the community's beautiful home. It was like a political campaign written by a drunk intern. The day of the open house arrived like a gift wrapped in sarcasm. I had no plans to interfere, no pranks, no setups, no dramatic speeches, but life, it turns out, has a wicked sense of humor all by itself. Rain, not just a drizzle, a full biblical downpour. Sheets of water hammering roofs, turning curbs into rivers, and soaking lawns into swampy, sucking pits. I sipped coffee on my porch, watching raindrops explode like fireworks on the sidewalk, and thought, today's the day my swamp earns its PhD. Sure enough, by noon, potential buyers started arriving. SUVs pulled up cautiously, drivers eyeing the puddles like soldiers surveying a battlefield. Most parked in the street, but then came the inevitable. A shiny white luxury SUV rolled right onto Karen's side of the curb and instantly began to sink. I swear, the earth itself sighed with satisfaction. The woman driving it, perfectly coiffed hair and all, stepped out into ankle-deep sludge, her stilettos vanishing into the mud like sacrifices to the suburban gods. She shrieked. Karen rushed out in a tailored pantsuit, arms flailing, trying to salvage the situation. She waved for the woman to follow her inside, promising coffee and fresh-baked cookies, but the woman was too busy hopping on one foot trying to rescue her $500 0-cent shoes from certain death. Word spread fast. Visitors slowed, windows rolled down, and wide-eyed families stared at the battlefield that had once been a manicured front lawn. The open house turned into a ghost town. Karen panicked. She started dragging traffic cones from her garage, trying to redirect people away from the swampy disaster. But each new puddle seemed to rise up out of nowhere, as if the land itself had finally chosen sides. Meanwhile, across the street, I set up a little stand, a cooler of lemonade, some folding chairs, and a handwritten sign that said, "Swamp tours free today. Souvenirs available upon request." I didn't say a word. Didn't need to. The universe was doing all the work for me. Some of the neighbors strolled over. Rosa, Elaine, Mr. Thompson. They sipped lemonade, chuckled under their breath, and exchanged glances that said it all. Poetic justice had arrived, wearing galoshes and carrying an umbrella. Karen finally lost it around 2 p.m. She marched across the street, face beet red, rain flattening her hair into limp curtains of rage. She pointed at me, her finger trembling like a misfiring sprinkler. "This is harassment," she screeched over the roar of rain. "This is sabotage." I leaned back in my chair, calmly sipping lemonade. "You sure you don't want a tour? I can show you where the best mud holes are. It's kind of a historical site now." The laughter from the neighbors hit her like a wave. She stomped back to her house, splashing through her own personal swamp, slamming the door behind her so hard the front window rattled. The open house was a bust. No offers, no second looks, just muddy footprints, ruined heels, and a soggy reputation sinking faster than her lawn. But I wasn't done yet. The next week, I organized a little event. Not on Karen's property, of course, that would be inappropriate. I hosted it in my front yard, with full HOA permission, under the newly popular name Swamp Graduation Day. I even made diplomas, handwritten certificates from my neighbors who had survived the great lawn wars of 2023, each one sealed with a sticker of a frog wearing a tiny cap and gown. We had snacks, music, a raffle. First prize was a pair of galoshes, and a special photo booth where people could take pictures next to a cutout of a giant frog holding a no parking sign. Best of all, we unveiled the Swamp Monument, a tasteful stone plaque installed at the very edge of my property that read, "Here lies the memory of Karen's SUV. May it rest in the bog it so valiantly sank into. Never forget." It was glorious. Karen didn't show up, of course. She stayed behind her curtains, peeking through the slats like a nosy ghost haunting her own defeat. But that didn't matter, because the real victory wasn't about embarrassing her anymore. It was about reclaiming peace, about turning a year of absurdity into something the neighborhood could laugh about instead of dread. By the time her house finally sold to a lovely retired couple who owned 3 cats and believed fervently in respecting property lines, Karen had faded into suburban legend. No one missed her, no one mentioned her, and my swamp? It thrived. Butterflies, frogs, even the occasional turtle. It became a symbol not just of resilience, but of how sometimes the best way to win a war is to build a fortress out of laughter and mud. As for me, I still sit on my porch most mornings, sipping coffee, watching the sunlight sparkle off the damp grass like it's winking at me. And sometimes, when the breeze is just right, I swear I can still hear the faint echo of a shriek carried by the wind, the final glorious reminder of the day the swamp swallowed the queen of entitlement whole. And let me tell you, it never tasted sweeter. You know, when people talk about battles that changed the world, they think of big, loud events, revolutions, uprisings, armies clashing on open fields. But sometimes the greatest victories come quietly. Sometimes they look like a mud pit and a woman screaming about sabotage while wearing heels 2 sizes too small. When Karen finally left, it wasn't with fireworks or sirens. It was the quiet roll of a moving truck early one Wednesday morning, the last box shoved hastily into the back, the for sale sign pulled up with the kind of force you reserve for yanking a stubborn weed. No farewell speeches, no last-ditch rants, just silence, and a neighborhood that felt like it had finally shed a winter coat it had worn for way too many seasons. The new owners moved in like a warm breeze, friendly smiles, actual hello waves, and, bless them, not a single tire dared touch my lawn. The first time they saw the Swamp Monument, they laughed so hard the husband had to lean against the mailbox. When I told them the story, they asked if they could add a little gnome dressed like a lifeguard to the display. Of course, I said yes. In fact, we made it a whole weekend project. It was during that lazy Saturday afternoon, surrounded by neighbors painting tiny frog statues and planting flowers, that it hit me. The real victory wasn't just about outsmarting Karen. It was about what grew out of the swamp after the storm. Community, camaraderie, laughter so loud it bounced off the houses like echoes of freedom. The swamp, once a trap, had become a symbol, a metaphor carved into the land. In a world full of Karens, sometimes you don't need to shout, you don't need to fight dirty, you don't even need to argue. You just need to build something so absurd, so brilliant, and so rooted in humor and patience that they end up fighting themselves. Aaron thought power came from being louder, meaner, more controlling. But true power? True power comes from making people laugh while you're holding the line. It comes from letting them see absurdity for what it is, and then refusing to be pulled down into it. After she left, the HOA, now under fresh, reasonable leadership, invited me to help rewrite the landscaping guidelines. We added a whole new section about eco-friendly designs, flood management, and neighborhood beautification projects. My swamp garden? It became the model example. Pictures of it now hang in the community center next to a plaque that reads, "Creativity builds stronger communities than control ever could." Every time I see it, I grin like a man who's gotten away with the perfect crime. Except my only weapon was a shovel and a wicked sense of humor. The new rules even encourage residents to plant bioswales, or rain gardens, using my project as proof that unconventional thinking can be both beautiful and functional. We called it the Suburban Renaissance Program, but between us, we just called it the Swamp Clause. A few months later, a local reporter caught wind of the story. She came out, took pictures, interviewed some neighbors, and ran a piece in the Sunday edition titled, "How One Man Turned HOA Nightmares into a Neighborhood Fairy Tale." It printed a shot of me standing next to the swamp monument, one hand resting proudly on the stone, a frog gnome saluting beside me. It was the kind of ending you usually only get in movies, the kind where the credits roll over laughter and lemonade and kids racing bikes down safe, happy streets. But let me tell you the secret. It wasn't really about winning. It was about showing that you could fight for your space, your sanity, your little corner of peace, and do it without losing yourself in bitterness. Aaron wanted to control everything. I just wanted to plant a few seeds and let the swamp do the rest. And man, did it. If you asked me what advice I'd give to anyone dealing with their own Karen, I'd say this: don't stoop. Build higher. Don't scream. Smile wider. Don't attack. Invite the whole neighborhood over for a swamp party and let them see who's really drowning in nonsense. Because when you meet stubbornness with patience, arrogance with creativity, and entitlement with humor, you don't just survive, you thrive. You turn mud into gold. You make legends out of lawns. And when your Karen finally drives away, tail tucked between her tires, you'll be left with more than just a victory. You'll have a kingdom built not on control, but on laughter. Not on fear, but on community. Not on rules, but on roots that no one can ever rip out. And somewhere, deep under the green turf and hidden ponds and blooming flowers, the swamp will still be there, smiling, waiting, a reminder that even the biggest messes can be turned into masterpieces, with just a little patience, a lot of heart, and a willingness to get your boots muddy. Because in the end, the swamp always wins. Always. Leave a comment below to let us know where you are watching from, and if you like fascinating stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story, and there are many surprises waiting for you in the next parts.